Yo, what is up YouTube? We're back here with the first edition of Fortnite Fridays, the new tradition of where I upload a video on Friday that doesn't actually have anything to do with Fortnite, except it will every once in a while. So today we're going to be doing a tier list of... Oh, goodbye microphone. Today we're going to be doing a tier list of how good different characters are at designing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe tracks. So yeah. To start us off with F tier, we have Wario. So Wario has 3 tracks in this game: Mount Wario, Wario's Gold Mine, and Wario Stadium. Now, unfortunately, none of them are all that great. Now, Mount Wario is a pretty sick idea. Now, the problem is that it just doesn't really play that well online. The tree section is just a complete disaster, and the downhill section at the end is just incredibly boring, and just please don't smart bounce me with a green off one of the walls. Now, everyone knows my opinions on Wario Stadium. Just a disaster of a track, way too narrow. If you take the lines in any non-optimal way, you are just getting completely cooked. Everyone is passing you, somebody is trailing you, somebody is backing you. You're gonna get smart bounced off every single wall. Oh, you don't have a shroom for the cut at the end? Congratulations, 3 people are passing you. Oh, you tried to save a shroom for the cut at the end? Congratulations, someone pulled 2 reds behind you and is now chaining both of them at the set because they're trying to get a shroom. And then Wario's Gold Mine is just a snooze fest. Everyone knows this. Like, what are we even doing? We're just sitting here and we're playing Wario's Gold Mine and we're driving in a straight line, and unlike Mario Kart Wii, if I get hit by the minecart, literally nothing happens. I just get the spin boost. Like, oh wow, that's so boring. What the scallop? So yeah, that's my opinion on the Wario tracks. So yeah, that's gonna place him firmly in F tier, and hopefully the rest of the designers can pull off something a bit better. So next up, unfortunately for the duo, we got Waluigi rounding off the start of D tier. So Waluigi has just 2 tracks. He's got Waluigi Pinball and Waluigi Stadium. Now, Waluigi Pinball, I really don't have much wrong with it. It's a pretty solid track, to be honest. It's just a little bit too long. There isn't a whole lot going on. We're kind of just driving and, you know, going in a straight line and having a few turns. It's not that interesting. Now, the pinball that goes on the track can be enjoyable to avoid. Unfortunately, it is very cycle dependent on if it really poses a threat at all. Lap 1, it pretty much always will. It's always fun to try and beat it out at the start, which brings it up quite a bit. But then after that, there just isn't a whole lot to do. And then the final section on the actual pinball table is, unfortunately, just, unless you really got the patterns down, it just feels very, very random what's gonna happen, because yes, the pinballs are just a complete pattern, so you can look at it before you go into it and know exactly where the pinballs are going to be. Now, unfortunately, there's 96 tracks in this game. That's very difficult. Nobody is able to do this consistently unless they're playing the track constantly, but it's just not quite popular enough for that to be the case. Now, what does happen is that when you play Waluigi Stadium instead, you're like, what the heck is going on? Because these ramps just don't make a whole lot of sense. If you go off any of the ramps in a strange way or a little bit wide, you will get sent to the complete opposite side of the track and lose a ton of time. It can be extremely frustrating to play online, especially when bumps are involved. If you are playing a smaller combo, which I myself do, then it can be extremely punishing to even be near someone on the ramps at the start of Waluigi Stadium. And don't even get me started on the big shortcut where you can take it shroomless over on the left. If you get bumped out there into the off-road, you are losing a full second a lot of the time. And that's if you don't get hit. Sometimes you'll get like hit by a green shell or something, and now I'm just completely stuck here. What am I gonna do about this nonsense? And what if I'm on lap 3? What the heck is my plan now? I don't even have one. Now, the good thing about Waluigi Stadium is the second half of the track, so the half-pipe section after, just plays amazingly. There is completely nothing wrong with it. Half-pipe sections are always awesome. It's super fun to squeeze out as many half-pipe boosts as possible. Getting that final turn where you get the trick at the end and then you get the The super mini turbo around the corner just feels great to nail. And then the final section where you bump into the fence before the item boxes to get a super tight line is super duper fun to get right. And drifting off that final ramp at the end, while it does save time, it's not even the most necessary thing. Having that control in the air to land exactly where you want to can be extremely helpful, and you don't lose that much time. So the ending of it also plays really well. You can play it safe and not get super duper punished. So Waluigi Stadium, while not a horrible track, there just is a lot of issues with it, especially at that starting section, so I just can't really place Waluigi anywhere above D tier. Alright, so finishing off D tier, we've moved on to the big man himself. Mario from Mario Brothers Plumbing, who would have thought? Anyway, Mario has a lot of tracks, so many in fact that I'm probably going to forget to talk about one. So his first one is Mario Kart Stadium, and Mario Kart Stadium is kind of like Baby Park. It's like, there's so many different ways to play it, there's a lot of ways to make it work. You can't make a plan on lap 1, it's just not possible. You need to wait until much further in to decide exactly what you're gonna do. There's often a shock, there's often not a shock, there's often 2 shocks. It's completely ridiculous. Sometimes there's 3 blue shells, sometimes there's 1. You never know. So sometimes running is good, sometimes running is bad. It's impossible to know when you start off playing this track. So the driving is, of course, extremely easy. There is the cool Nisk at the start, which saves a good amount of time, and if you do it pretty cleanly, you can pass people right away, which is pretty awesome. It's a cool little thing to do, but do you want to pass people right away? No, you oftentimes don't, because you want mushrooms, so you can pull off the motion glider shortcut at the end of the race. If you do this properly, you can save like 2 or 3 seconds over people that have to drive around. Now, of course, it is possible to glide through the shortcut without a mushroom, but it is quite slow and takes a bit of setup, which can be really dangerous if someone has like triple green shells or something in front of you. So you gotta watch out. Now, moving on to the next track, we'll talk about Mario has 4 circuit tracks. So starting with the new one to this game, Mario Circuit 8 from the Flower Cup. So this track is, it's a shape. It's an interesting shape. We like go upside down and stuff. I think what is nice is this track, I do feel like I'm upside down, which is a lot more than I can say for a lot of other anti-gravity tracks. It does, like, it feels like Mario Kart 8 when I played this track. This track is Mario Kart 8. This is like one of the main tracks they showed off before the game came out. It's even in like one of the tutorials for the game. So it's a pretty fun track. Now, it is of course a bagger. The one big shortcut about halfway through saves a huge amount of time, and if you have a star at the end, you can take it extremely tight before the glider ramp at the end, which also saves a lot of time. It's pretty short, maybe about a minute and a half, so it is certainly a runnable track. It's also great to kind of sit in like third and have like a shroom for the end, which is pretty cool. Like, there's a good amount of ways to play this, but there just isn't any cool driving. It's just a straight line, and then you get ultra mini turbos around the turns. That's it. Like, there's nothing to do. So like, it's just not very good, and there's no way around that. Now, Mario Circuit from the Game Boy in the Shell Cup, again, also a bagger, has 3 different Nisks you can take. You can take the one in the anti-grav section, which is pretty cool. There's the one at the start where you hop through the grass at the first turn. That one's pretty fun. And then the one where you hop over the tires is pretty sick. Now, unfortunately, for me to enjoy a bagger, it needs to feel like very fair to run, and a lot of the time this track just doesn't. So what do I mean by this? There's the one little item box over in the like pit stop area at the start of the lap. Now, the problem with that item box is that if you're in first, it's gonna very rarely make sense to go for that. So the people in second and third are just getting extra items compared to you, which means that it is very likely that you're going to get red shelled at some point. Plus, this track will basically always have a blue shell. Now, Double shock is extremely rare on this track, I've noticed, because people like to just hold on to their bills and not chain the items because they want to take the bill extension. Now, I do think that bill extensions are, in general, good for baggers because I think it makes running a bit more predictable because, you know, if people are just holding their bills in bottom 4 and not chaining at all, like they're holding a bill through like 2 or 3 sets a lot of the time, then there's just not going to be multiple shocks, which means that running is way more doable, which is, I'd say, definitely a good thing. But because it's really hard to get a huge lead on this track because there isn't really any cool driving besides the Nisks, but everyone else has shrooms anyway, so it doesn't really matter. You can't get too much of a lead, so I don't really like it that much. And now, Mario Circuit 3 from the Super Nintendo. This track, well, if it wasn't in Mario Kart Wii, I'd probably hate it, but it's in Mario Kart Wii, so nostalgia, because you play it like the exact same way. It's just, you take every turn super duper tight, and it's just how tight can you go, which, I mean, I like it. Running this track is pretty fun. I have a good time with it usually. I rarely bag it unless I get hit out at the start, but I don't really bag baggers in general. Like, I don't not like baggers. It's weird. But this track, like, I mean, there isn't really anything to say that I haven't said, and that's the problem with his Mario tracks. He went for quantity over quality, and like, there really isn't anything to write home about. Unless, of course, we're playing DS Mario Circuit. This track has a wiggler on it. That is awesome. And the main grass shortcuts after the giant pipe that you drive through, it's really cool because there's a couple ways to take it. There's one where you can kind of like swerve in between a bush and a tree, and it saves like maybe like an extra half a second compared to taking it the safe way, and I think that's really, really fun. Because it's good to have different ways to do a shortcut that are significantly riskier, because most shortcuts on baggers are not really difficult at all. So it's nice to have one that is really punishing if I fail. So this track is really fun. You can do a little corner hop at the very end on the final like U-turn at the end, which is pretty sick. I really enjoy that because it lets you get a bit of a lead. And because the shortcuts are pretty far in, people will like to save their shrooms for a very, very long time, which means that a lot of people aren't actually going to be able to dodge the shock. So you can still get a good spot even if there's like a shock and a blue hitting you in first. So it's pretty fair. I'd say this is certainly the best Mario track, but unfortunately the rest of them are just not great and all feel the same. So can't put Mario any higher than D tier, unfortunately. Alright, starting off C tier, we're going to keep this one kind of simple. There isn't a whole lot to say about Yoshi. So, Yoshi has 3 tracks: Yoshi Valley, Yoshi Circuit, and Yoshi's Island. Now, Yoshi Valley and Yoshi Circuit, we'll start with those two. Yoshi Valley, it's like its whole thing is the different paths, but most of the paths suck. Like, there's one good one, and then there's one that's good for coins, and then the other ones are completely useless, and why would you ever take them? And then there's the whole issue with using the bill at the very end of the track, and then it goes around to the cannon, and it's like -5 seconds. Congratulations. If you're a new player, you just got scammed because you didn't know anything about this. Also, the track isn't very popular, so sometimes there's like not new players that do that, and that's kind of stupid. I don't like it. Now, Yoshi Circuit, my main issue with that track is that it's like the most unrunnable bagger ever. Like, oh, I'm in first place, too bad. There's gonna be 2 shocks, 2 blues, and 5 people are gonna take a bill extension at some point, and they're just gonna get like all the way to first because that's how the track works. But it's not like it's not fun. It's a fun enough track, but it's like I can't run it, and that makes me sad. Now, Yoshi's Island, though. Yoshi's Island is single-handedly bringing Yoshi up from F to C because this track is awesome. It's a pretty fun layout to drive. The water section isn't very annoying. None of the turns are silly. And then you get to the end with a cloud shortcut. The cloud shortcut is like the most unique thing in this game on any track. It's super fun to pull off. It feels really cool when you're able to hit the cloud when like a bunch of people in front of you fail it. Oh, it's also really fun in like team-based formats when like you hit it and now your teammates get to take the shortcut. That's always really fun. There's little strategies you can do with that of like, oh, I'm gonna skip the cloud so the guy in front of me doesn't get it, but my teammate's gonna hit it so that I get it. There's little things like that, and that's really cool. Now, there is the issue of like, sometimes it can be really hard to go fast and also get the cloud, but to be honest, if you know the cycles, it's not that bad. And like, the cycles, the lap 2 cycle is like chill. It's just the lap 3 one that's bad, and you should generally be on about the same pace on lap 3 every single time. Like, you're only hitting the cloud if you're in like a top 6 spot, which means like you're on about the same pace as you always would be. So yeah, that's why Yoshi's going to be C tier. No higher, no lower would make any sense. Now, finishing off the end of C tier, we got Toad. Now, Toad is such a silly little guy. He's in a very similar situation as Yoshi, where he has some okay tracks, and then he has one that's like very awesome, that like really brings him up. So, Toad's Turnpike is an abomination. It is so boring. It's literally just, I drive in a circle. I drive tight. There's cars, I guess. The car patterns are not hard. Except for like one part on lap 3 sometimes. But like, you play the track like 3 times and now you don't get hit by the cars anymore. It's silly. It's also like there's no shortcuts or anything. It's literally just you drive. I don't have anything else to say. It's awful. Now, Toad Harbor is a vibe. It's an awesome beginner track. Like, I really don't think that there's... Honestly, it might be the best beginner track for like OG Mario Kart 8. Of like the first 16, I'd say, or the first 8, I'd say it's probably the best one. It's just fun to play. There's nothing to say about it. It's just, turns are kind of fun. The tram is cool. I like how I can like drive behind the tram. You get some coins or an item box if I'm feeling a little risky. It's fun. And then bouncing off the tram at the ending section, probably the most fun, like, advanced technique that's like also intended by Nintendo of like any Mario Kart 8 like OG track. It's a very, very fun. I enjoy it a lot. Oh, also getting the double box when you like do the ramp shortcut over the water is pretty cool. Yeah, good track. We like Toad Harbor. Now, there is one track that Toad has created that stands above all others, and it is known as 3DS Toad Circuit. This track is just beautiful. It is a perfect bagger. There is no way to top this track. It is the best bagger besides Snowland that Nintendo has ever put out. Maybe. Unless I decide it's not. But for starting out the booster pass, I cannot believe that Nintendo would give us such a gem as the second track in the entire booster course pass. Like, that is crazy. I get saving like Wii Rainbow Road for the end, but how did you not save Toad Circuit for the end? It's just so awesome. Like, they had to start us out strong. Now, why is this track such an amazing bagger? It's short, so it's automatically runnable. That's awesome. Now, the next thing is you don't actually save that much time with like items. Now, the bill is like kind of mid on Toad Circuit, and that's great. I'm not like super mad if I pull a bill, but it's like you're super reliant on the shock if you're bagging or pulling a golden and going through the grass. Stars are awesome, but like, are they that good? Not really. There's no like massive off-road shortcut, which means that unlike a track like MC3, it is super runnable, which is very, very fun. It makes for like a fun dynamic of like, okay, how's this gonna go? If I'm in first place on lap 3 of Toad Circuit, I'm not really that worried because, yeah, I might get hit out, but there's a good chance I'm still gonna get like 4th or 5th. It's great. I'm never really like terrified of the position I'm in on Toad Circuit, which I just can't really say for most other baggers. So definitely an awesome track.
in my opinion. A lot of people agree with me. Don't worry. Toad Circuit is widely enjoyed by the fan base. Don't even fret. Alright, so next up, we got the Piranha Plants, led by PD Piranha, of course. So, the Piranha Plants have chosen an interesting idea of not just having like one person designated to design the track for them, and I think this has worked out pretty well for them. It's also meant that they have learned as they go along. So first we have Piranha Plant Slide from Mario Kart 7. Now this track is pretty cool actually. Like, it's pretty simple, but the tight driving is kind of weird to do super duper well because there's little bumps a lot of the time, there's little jumps. It's fun to drive tight in the water section. Usually I'm not a big fan of water, but I think it works pretty well here. Like, it actually does feel like I'm in like an underwater like sewage system kind of thing, which is what I believe the Piranha Plants were going for, so well done by them. I'm sure they got a lot of feedback during the process because there were so many of them. Now, the shortcut at the end of Piranha Plant Slide is probably what makes it interesting. It means that, like, while being in first on this track is pretty strong, it's not like a guaranteed win. It's like, and there's usually going to be 2 blue shells. Often 1 shock, not necessarily. So it means that, like, there are some risks to running it, although it is pretty safe. And you can definitely get like a comeback win at the end. So I think it plays out pretty awesome. And a lot of teams really enjoy this track, so like I think they're onto something. The Piranha Plants definitely have some fans, but they get even more fans from the masterpiece known as Piranha Plant Cove. Piranha Plant Cove is just awesome. Like, it almost seems crazy to me that I have the Piranha Plants all the way down in B tier when I have 5 designers up in A and S tier, but those tracks are just so awesome. Now, Piranha Plant Cove is by far the best water track in the game. It uses the water physics so well, never am I annoyed that I'm in water. That track just would feel so wrong if it wasn't water. The cool shortcuts where I have to like hold up in the water on lap 1 are just beautiful. Like, there isn't really a shortcut like that. The closest thing is, I would say, the Big Blue shortcut, but the water physics make it a lot more interesting, and getting to bounce on the little like coral thing is super fun, and having to make sure that I just land like just out of the off-road and, you know, but still going as tight as possible makes it really enjoyable and super rewarding to make cleanly. So it's a very fun track. Also, like Piranha Plant Slide, it is baggable, but being in first is definitely pretty strong. Now, it's not super easy to back people on most sections, but the bomb is going to be extremely effective, but still kind of fair to avoid if you're in like second or third. So I think it's a very balanced track for both strategies, and so I think that like just there's no reason to not like it. It's certainly not going to be like the best track ever, but it's certainly fun. I've certainly said certainly too many times, certainly. Alright, so starting off A tier, we got Princess Daisy. Wow. Who would have thought princesses were so good at designing racing tracks? That's very awesome. So Daisy has 2 tracks. We got Daisy Cruiser and Daisy Circuit, both retros. So Daisy Cruiser is definitely my like runner of choice. Lunar Lights loves this track. This track is played by us pretty much every single war. If we have multiple top spots, we love going Daisy Cruiser. Super fun track to play, very rewarding to be good at. Just love this track and everything about it. But also, wow, how could I like a track that's just a hard runner? Don't I like when it's possible to bag, so that's fair? Well, you see, it is possible to bag on Daisy Cruiser because we have the bill extension. The bill extension is extremely powerful on this track and sets you up perfectly into a drift to where you can even make that turn while using a golden mushroom. So if you had like a bullet in last place on lap 3, you might get all the way up into like 4th or 5th place at the end. And that's before factoring in that there could be a shock. This track is super forgiving to play, even if you don't know exactly what you're doing. but it's still going to be significantly more consistent to just be the person in the front the whole time. Backs are pretty strong on this track, bombs especially. Now, it is fairly easy to space out from someone though, so if you get bombed and you saw the bomb ahead of time, that's kind of on you. So it's definitely a fair track to get like bombed on. Now, moving on to Daisy Circuit. Daisy Circuit is a very different kind of track. See, the shortcut at the start does save a lot of time and keeps you relatively safe compared to the people on the ground, but it's not really like worth it to where like, oh, I need to make sure I have shrooms for the cut. So what ends up happening is you end up with a lot of people trying to run it and not very many people trying to bag it, like more than you would on a lot of other tracks that have a big shroom shortcut. Because it's like, it's really good, but it's barely worth it. So you can't really play around it heavily. Although being on the glider is pretty fun. I'd say it's a decent track to drive. The turn at the start is kind of fun. It's kind of unforgiving if you just take it a little bit too tight, because that off-road slows you down really fast, and hitting the wall just completely ruins your race. And then when you get to the tunnel section, you can get smart bounce, but the way the walls are oriented, it actually avoids that pretty well. So it's a really fun section to drive, because it's like, you think, oh, it's going to be really scary, but it ends up not being that bad most of the time. Although the odd bomb is kind of annoying. And then the final section with the boost panels, you have the option of going tight or going wide for the double and the coins. It's a good track design, because having that decision, especially on lap 3 at the very end, when maybe you pull, like, maybe if you have 2 items, you get like a star and triple shrooms instead of just a star, and you end up gaining back that time that you would have lost, or maybe you even pull a bill. But the problem with Daisy's Circuit, I found, is that there just isn't a whole lot about it that's like unique to it. Like, the shortcut is very different because it puts you on the glider, and a lot of those like get on the glider shortcuts don't actually save much time, but this one does save a good chunk of time. So it's cool, but there's nothing like crazy about it. It's not super difficult to drive. I would enjoy it if it was a little bit harder, but overall it's a pretty good track. So this is gonna land Daisy at a solid A tier. All right, finishing off A tier, we have, first of all, the man, the myth, the legend, Funky Kong is here, and he will be representing the country of America, because you may not realize it, but the USA has actually designed 2 Mario Kart tracks for us in this game. We got New York Minute and Los Angeles Laps. Now, you may be wondering, wait a second, how did they design these tracks? What? What do you mean? I don't think anyone from the US was like, let me design a Mario Kart track. Well, they designed the cities. That's good enough for me. It's not like Donkey Kong designed like his jungle to be a race course. It just was a race course. And that's why he's awesome. So, here we are on New York Minute. So, what somehow makes me think that New York is a good enough track to get the USA into A tier? Well, New York Minute is another one of those tracks where you can kind of do whatever you want. It's super, because it's a traction-based track, it can be really difficult to hold on to that first place position, or especially to like take it back from someone. So if you're able to do it, it ends up being really rewarding, and you can benefit a lot from just being in first place. So being in the front is definitely pretty impactful. But bagging this track is also really good. And why is that? Well, having like a star or a bill at like the start of lap 3 works really well. The star allows you to go very, very tight. There is the little grass shortcut, which is possible to take shroomless, which is great for running, but you definitely save significantly more time taking it with a mushroom. And also, it will set you up for chaining into that last site extremely well. So having like a star or a golden or a bill in that section is just amazing. So the track ends up being good for both positions, for the front and the back. But of course, it's still going to be more reliable for those front spots, which is the kind of thing that I'm looking for in a track that caters to both sides. Now, moving on to LA Laps. LA Laps is kind of like the opposite Instead, it's going to be a lot more consistent playing it from the back, but you still are going to need a lot of things to go correctly for you. I personally definitely enjoy playing LA laps from the front more, because you end up with those 2 item sets to take that massive shortcut at the start. Practically everyone who's not in a very good spot is going to be able to take those shortcuts, and they'll end up in a really good spot after that, and then that sets up the front run for the rest of the race. Now what will happen, although being in front ends up being really strong and can net you a super good spot, the shock is going to be on pretty much every LA Laps race, as well as a double blue shell. There'll pretty much always be a blue at like beginning of lap 2, and then also a lot of the time at the end of lap 3, and then the shock is pretty much always going to come out at like the end of lap 3, and if you're in those top spots, you're most likely getting hit after the final set. But if the shock does not come there, or you end up getting far enough to where you are safe, then being in the front just ends up being really good. And so the risk reward of LA Labs makes it extremely enjoyable for me, which means that I feel very, very confident placing the USA into A tier. All right, moving on. We're getting to the best of the best. Next up, we got Bowser. Bowser has 2 tracks in this game. They are both castles, of course, because, I mean, he's made so many castles over the years. Why not use them? It'd be a shame not to. So, Bowser's Castle from Mario Kart 8. Starting off with that one. So this track, like, besides the Mario Kart Wii Bowser's Castle, there is not a Bowser's Castle to me that feels more like a Bowser's Castle. Like, we got the lava everywhere. We got, like, crazy things going on inside. Like, it feels like a castle. If I was running through this as a Mario level, it wouldn't feel ridiculous. And, like, Bowser's got his defenses going. Like, that's awesome. Like, some of the other Bowser's castles don't really have that as much, and that's great to see. You can also tell that Bowser made this castle specifically with this track in mind. He was really thinking ahead. Now, how does Bowser's Castle play? Well, it ends up being a, let me try and be in like the upper mid spots so I can get a shroom for the end, and then shroom up ahead of the guy in first who won't have a shroom for the final shortcut, because that shortcut is pretty darn good. And also, because of the split path section, it ends up making first just not very powerful in general, because you can't really back stuff super well because they can just go on the opposite path from you if they want. But what this also does is it means that the people in like second, third, fourth are not going to really be thinking too much about redding you, because they can just pull a shroom for the end, and they don't want to be in first because it's hard to get too much of a lead because of that shortcut. So first ends up being safe, but also kind of risky for the end. So I'd say that it really plays out very well. It's fun to play from the back too, because like if you have like a golden on like the middle section before the glider at the end, you can actually gain a good amount of time because people can't really snake super well, so the extra time from the golden ends up being a little more valuable than usual. And now moving on to okay guys, I'm silly, I forgot about Neo Bowser City. Yeah, so this one is like obviously not a castle. This is Bowser turned like his city into like a street race, which again is very Formula 1 of him and a very smart decision by Bowser. So this track is certainly a runner, but it has the same kind of thing as Bowser's Castle where there is that shortcut at the end. Now the difference here is that first is going to be a lot more powerful because there's many blind turns. It's very narrow, bombs are very strong. So this is definitely one of those tracks where like you always want to be in first. Now the other thing is that since it's narrow, like those backs are going to be a lot stronger, and also what'll happen is people's lines are just kind of weird because of the slippery physics, because it's raining. So this track ends up being really rewarding to be good at, kind of like New York Minute. So it's definitely an S tier track for me. Or it definitely is going to put Bowser up in that S tier for me. I don't actually like the track that much, because like there's a lot of good tracks. But yeah. And then moving on to Bowser's Castle 3. Obviously this is the best Super Nintendo track. in this game. There is absolutely no way that you could think otherwise. It's just so crazy. There's a volcano in the background. There's lava everywhere. Like, this track just screams Bowser. Now, the one gripe I have with it is, like, I don't feel like I'm in a castle. This is like the lava moat around his castle or something. So, like, why are there walkways? Like, he made this fully to be a race course, which I think is okay. And, like, it really shows some of Bowser's, like, design ideas. So, how does this track play? Well, again, Bowser loves his big shortcuts in the middle of the track near the end. So the big shortcut here probably saves about a second. The problem with that one is it's really easy to like shroom ahead of first and then immediately trail them. And I don't like that part of it. But what I do like is that you can play around that in first because you can just go wide because that person's basically always going to like be super committed to their line. So if you're paying attention, you can avoid that. So it ends up being another track where just playing in those upper mid spots and like cycling around and like maybe I'm in first, maybe I'm not. You only really want to be in first if you have like a good reason to, or you can get a lead, or you have like a horn or something. Like, I think that's great. Like, all of Bowser's tracks kind of play out that way. So I think he's a really, really good track designer. But yeah, this will put Bowser firmly up in the S tier as just one of the best designers that we've ever seen in Mario Kart. All right. Finishing off S tier, we got the country of Canada. So the country of Canada, just like the United States, has decided to design 2 Mario Kart tracks for us. They've designed Maple Tree Way, which is obviously in Canada. Just think about it for a second. Like, of course it's Canada. And then we got Vancouver Velocity. So starting off with Maple Tree Way, this track is like top 5 in the series. This track is just gorgeous. It's so much fun to play. It's been amazing in all 3 games it's come out in. And Mario Kart 8 is, of course, no exception. So, why is Maple Tree Way so? First of all, it is a runner, but it's not a hard runner because of the cannon. Now, unlike a track like DK Mountain that ends up being extremely shock reliant because of how much time you'll lose if like you get shocked on the cut or you get shocked and you have to drive around the cut. It ends up being like, you know, not actually that bad on this track because usually it's just a pretty neutral shock for the top spots. It's like, it's hard to make it really bad for them unless you shock them off the ramp at the end. But at that point, the shock is so late that it's kind of just random anyway if you get punished super hard for that. So it works out pretty well. Now, there will be 2 blues on me. It's 2 minutes and 30 seconds long. Like, there's going to be 2 blue shells, but it's okay because Maple can easily just turn into one of those tracks where you're cycling top spots with other people, and so someone might have a blue dodge and maybe they just take the blue for free and you don't have to worry about anything. It works out pretty well most of the time. Running this track is always going to be the best strategy to do, and that's awesome. Now, moving on to Vancouver. Vancouver has some of the like weirdest driving, and I just think that's cool. Like the first section is probably my favorite section of any tour track. Like the first section, and except maybe Athens Dash, but like going on that bridge just feels really unique, and the bumps at the start, while they can be fairly punishing, it's such a wide track. You can kind of do whatever you want, and it just makes the first section pretty enjoyable. And going along that bridge and drifting in the anti-grav is actually like, it's actually fun, and that's not something that I can say about a lot of tour tracks that have like these weirder sections that aren't really just a city. Now, moving on to the rest of the track, the second section is definitely just a snaking section along with some wide turns, so it's not quite as interesting, but driving through the hockey stadium at the end is just one of the cooler things. A lot of the tour tracks decide to do that. I mean, LA Laps has you drive through the baseball stadium. There's the soccer pitch on Madrid. So that a lot of the later tour tracks decide to do that, and I think it's pretty cool. The ice skating Shy Guys are actually a fun obstacle to avoid. It's pretty much impossible to know what the cycle is going to be going into it because you can't see going into it, unlike a track like Waluigi Pinball, where you might be able to know what the pinball timing is going to be. But you end up with enough time to avoid them most of the time, so it doesn't really affect it too much. And that turn is just brutal out of the hockey stadium, and I think it's very fun because it makes some combos that would otherwise be pretty darn useless a bit better because they can make the turn easy. Like my combo, for example. So I really enjoy Vancouver Velocity, and so with that and Maple Trueway, definitely going to put Canada as an S tier track design. All right, we finally made it to the coveted Donkey Kong tier. And who's in the Donkey Kong tier? Well, it is, of course, our pal Donkey Kong, the greatest track designer in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Now, what did Donkey Kong do to achieve such an amazing feat? So, Donkey Kong has designed 3 tracks for us in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. First of all, we've got DK Jungle. DK Jungle is definitely the newest of his 3 tracks. Now, this track is pretty darn good. It is a runner, but there are not 1, but 2 different bill extensions you can take. This track is extremely forgiving to catch up on, but being in first is definitely where you really want to be. Now, the blue shell will be fairly strong in this track. A lot of the sections, if you get messed up, are going to slow you down quite significantly. So being in those top spots, besides first, also end up being pretty good. Now, because of the bridge, in about the middle of the lap after the super bounce, it ends up being really scary to be in like second or third. So a lot of the time, you're completely terrified up there, which is just exactly what we want in Mario Kart. Chaos everywhere, but still risks to being in first. With this track, no matter what position you are going into lap 3, you can still have a good race, and I think that's awesome. Now, can I even think of issues with DK Jungle besides backs being a little too strong? I don't think so. Not really. This track is just fun to drive. It's pretty simple. The super bounce feels awesome to get perfectly because you can just fly over everyone else's head. It's just super fun. Track for everyone. Also, there's a super bounce, but inward players don't hate it. So that's pretty cool that they're happy, I guess. But I'm not an inward player, so I don't really care. But it's cool that they're happy because then we can pick the track more. So that's pretty sick. And more than I can say for Donkey Kong's other tracks, because Donkey Kong, my goat, has decided to completely pretend that inward players don't exist. He is just not paying you any attention. If you decide to nerf yourself like that, too bad. You're not enjoying my stuff. That's what Donkey Kong said. I interviewed him the other day, and he said exactly that. So on DK Summit, first of all, this is definitely the best snowy mountain track. Significantly better than Mount Wario and Merry Mountain. Like, how could DK Summit not be the greatest snow track? Or the snow mountain track ever? Actually, well, it is just the greatest snow track. Yeah. But Donkey Kong has perfected the snow tracks. He has designed a track where a lot of the driving is from knowing just what to do and when, rather than how precise can I be. So, even though we're in ice physics the whole time, it is practically irrelevant. Yes, it may make the double shortcut awkward, but we here know that the double shortcut is meant to be awkward. It's meant to be so unforgiving if you make a mistake or you get bumped. You need to be so aware of your surroundings going into that shortcut. Nailing the double, even just getting a good one compared to a bad one, will just gain you so much time on the competition. And if you are somehow forced to drive around and you fall off, you are losing 5 seconds, and you are going to sit there and deal with it. Because the fun is coming up to the shortcut every time and hoping that you can nail it. And then sometimes it'll go wrong, and that's okay, because a lot of the time it'll go right. And that's just super duper fun. Donkey Kong has perfected the important shortcuts that are basically just considered the regular route at this point. Because he has decided to make them not too difficult, but still definitely possible to mess up, and mess up badly. And this track also has 2 different half pipes that are important, and that's pretty fun. It's kind of like Waluigi Stadium, where you just ride up the half pipe over and over before doing that final turn. Except this one is a little less stupid because you just do the turn in the sky, because you can just skip the turn by being in the sky. You can't do that on Waluigi Stadium. It's dumb. It doesn't work. Well, on this track you can, and that's sick. There's actually 2 turn skip half pipes. That is very awesome and cool. Now, going to DK Mountain, the final track that we will be talking about in this video. This track has some of the most fun driving ever. The little bit at the start, snaking through literally just that first S-turn, is actually super rewarding to get fast. It's super narrow, but there is just enough space to get your double MT and then set up the UMT for the long turn. And that's super fun because Donkey Kong knows that just rewarding people for being able to get their drifts out fast is just something that he really wants to do. He had the idea and he just went with it. So that first section, right even before the cannon, is actually pretty cool. And then when you are going down the mountain, Donkey Kong decided to design it in a way that if someone could figure out a way to get up on the right wall next to the main route, then they would get to take a big shortcut. Now, I'm not sure if Donkey Kong himself figured out a nice way to do this, and I think it's even less likely they found out a good way to do it consistently without a mushroom. Because doing it with the mushroom is quite simple, and is a great strategy to know if you're a newer player and just looking for a way to gain a little bit of time on your opponents. But knowing how to do the mountain shortcut without a mushroom is definitely something super fun to learn, because you can just gain about a second on everyone else just every single lap. And now, just as this track has become older and older, just more and more people have been doing that shortcut all the time, and that's just super fun to see, people embracing the uniqueness of DK Mountain. Coming along to the gap jump at the end, it's just such a simple shortcut, but there's so many ways to mess it up. If you get bumped, it can be awkward. If you go too far to the left, sometimes you'll hit the fence at the end. If you are able to get it perfectly, you can set up a drift that you land with a ultra mini turbo, and then you just gain another like half a second on everyone. There's also safe ways to do it where maybe you did have to go wide, you can still recover from this and end up going wide. There's the smart steering strat of let me just kind of drive off it way too fast and I'm gonna go flying into the grass, but I turn on smart steering and then I'm okay. There's so many ways to handle that shortcut. It's so much fun. And now Donkey Kong loves his cannons. That is the best part to know about Donkey Kong. And here on the Elephant62 YouTube channel, we love cannons because, first of all, we can kind of just not pay that much attention in the cannon and give us a little break. Sometimes if you're fast, you can grab your water bottle and take a sip of your water, and that is awesome. Now, of course, you can move slightly, but how much does that really matter? And also just it makes these tracks into runners, but there's going to be a shock, and that's really going to shake things up, and that just spices up the tracks so much. So Donkey Kong is the undisputed champion of track designers in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and I hope that for the next Mario Kart game, all these other track designers that are given the chance to make multiple tracks can learn from him, because a lot of them did a good job, but there's just something that Donkey Kong's figured out that just no one else has been able to replicate perfectly. So hopefully he can give them some pointers. I'm sure he would. I think he's a great guy to talk to. But yeah, thanks for watching the tier list. Now you know that I firmly believe the Donkey Kong tracks are just the best ones ever. And Donkey Kong, if you're watching, love you, bro.